Hi, everyone. Well, thank you so much for the kind introduction, and thank you so much for joining me today for this webinar. I'm Rita Men. I'm associate professor at the University of Florida. It's really my great pleasure to be here today to share with you some of my recent research about a very interesting and important topic, and which I think is also very relevant for professionals today, which is how should leaders communicate during the COVID-19 pandemic? I have a little bit more background information here about myself. I have been teaching with the University of Florida for 5 years. And before that, I got my PhD from the University of Miami and then taught 3 years at the Southern Methodist University. I also served part-time for the Institute for Public Relations Organization Communication Research Center in the past 4 years and recently completed my term. And starting in January, I will be taking over a new role as associate editor for the Journal of Communication Management. My background, as Marika kind of introduced, is basically in internal communication and leadership communication, with some publications in this area. And because of my passion in internal communication, about 2 years ago, Marika kindly reached out to me and invited me to serve as the lead instructor for the masterclass in employee communication for their executive masters in corporate communication program at RSM, which I thoroughly enjoyed doing. And my next master class is scheduled in May next year. So if any of you're interested in internal communication, and if you have not taken this course before, I hope to see some of your faces in my class. So today we have about an hour for the whole session. My plan is to talk about 35 minutes or to 40 minutes or so, and then open the floor for questions. And I would like to invite you to share your wisdom and your perspectives, observations regarding the best practices of leadership communication. This is the structure of my presentation today. I will start by talking a little bit why this is a relevant and important topic for professionals. And then I will start by discussing some best practices of CEO communication during COVID-19 and share with you a few good examples, and mainly to focus on what strategies really work. And then I will share with you my 2 recent studies on leadership communication during COVID-19, and to see some very first-hand data from the employee's perspective and focus on whether these strategies really worked or not and why. And towards the end, we will sum up some best practices and implications for professionals and for leaders. So now to start. Leadership communication during COVID-19. Well, as we all have experienced, COVID-19 has changed so many aspects of our life and our work. For businesses and leaders, it really posed a challenge and a true test for the leaders' crisis leadership and their communication ability. Well, on the one hand, the businesses, they have to struggle to sustain their operations. On the other hand, the leaders have to deal with the stressed employees, concerned employees who are worried about their safety and their job security. Really waking up every morning, we don't know, we still have a job. We don't know whether we'll be under furlough or we'll be under layoff. And for those who are working from home, they have to struggle to manage the home-work boundary and manage the work-life balance. I have seen colleagues showing up at the Zoom meetings with their kids running around in the background. Oh, by the way, talking about that, I have warned my 2-year-old downstairs not to knock on the door, but if she does, I probably will invite her to join us. I hope you don't mind. And we know, like in the challenging times, employees, they tend to turn more to their top leaders for information, guidance, support, and assurance. According to the Institute for Public Relations recent study, over 50% of the senior communication executives surveyed identified the CEO as the primary communicator for the pandemic. So it is important for the top leaders to be visible, to be communicative, to be willing to communicate frequently with employees to keep them updated regarding what is going on and share them with the truthful information without sugarcoating it, and also to keep employees motivated and engaged, and more importantly, to show care and support in these challenging times. So now the question comes is specifically, how should the leaders communicate effectively during this pandemic? Starting the beginning of the pandemic in the US here in March, I have kept an eye on how the CEOs, especially in those established companies like Fortune companies, have been communicating with different stakeholders, and then how they are communicating with their employees. And also I compared some of the best practices I observed from some good examples with what the literature has suggested about effective leadership communication, and concluded these 5 principles here. First, transparency, then authenticity, empathy, gratitude, and optimism. So now we will take a deep dive into each of these principles here and see how they should be applied. First of all, transparent communication. Transparent communication has been recognized as one of the most important best practices for corporate communication, both internally and externally, and also for leaders as well. So what exactly is transparent leadership communication? So there are 4 major aspects here. First of all, full disclosure. It is important for the leader to proactively share frequent, timely, and relevant information to employees, and to let them know what is going on, and then let them know how much impact the pandemic is having on the business. And that also, it is important for them to provide simple facts, factual information, again, without sugarcoating it. Also, it is important to provide clear information. In this very emotion-laden and information-laden situation, it is important for leaders to make sure that their messages are understandable, clear, and digestible, easily digestible for their audience, for the employees. Then accuracy. As we have all seen, there's so much disinformation and misinformation online about the pandemic, especially at the beginning. It is important for leaders to fact check, to make sure that the information they provide is credible, and also direct employees to credible sources, such as the health departments or health officials. And then participation. One question we often ask when we talk about transparency is, transparent for whom? It's really, it doesn't matter whether you as the communicator, as the leader, as the organization think you're being transparent or not. What matters is whether your audience, your employees think you're being transparent or not. So to that end, it is important for the leaders to listen to employees, to address their needs, to understand their needs, what the information they need, how often they need, and also to involve them in the decision-making process. Because when the employees are involved, they are able to see the back of the scene story. So they'll tend to see the process as being more transparent. Also, when they are involved, they are more likely to buy in the decisions during this pandemic. Here I have 2 quick examples. The first one, some of you might be familiar with the name, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo. He has gained great popularity for his transparent approach in handling this pandemic. One thing he has been doing is he would host a daily televised briefing to update the public regarding what is going on, how many new cases there are, what are the new measures, policies that have been undertaken by the government. And according to Wall Street Journal, their poll, a poll that reported by Wall Street Journal, over 85% of American voters have approved the way Andrew Cuomo has been dealing with this pandemic because of his transparent communication. And another example is Marriott CEO, Arne Sorensen. In his video message released as early as March, he was very upfront, very transparent with the impact this pandemic was having on the business of Marriott. He said, in terms of our business, COVID-19 is like nothing we have seen before. For a company that is 92 years old, that is born to witness the Great Depression, World War II, and any other global crisis, that's saying something. Here are the facts. COVID-19 has more severe and sudden effect on our business than 9/11 and 2009 financial crisis combined. So as you can see here, he's very, very transparent with the negative impact, the consequence the COVID-19 is having on their business. So the second principle, authentic communication, it is often hand in hand with the transparency. So what is being authentic in the communication from the leader's perspective? It involves four major aspects here. First of all, truthfulness. So that means the leaders in his communication or her communication, they needed to stay true to their values and beliefs, stay true to who they are. So they communicate in accordance to what they believe in instead of what the others expect them to do. And the second aspect is genuineness, which is to really show the human side of leadership, to be personable, be real, and bring into life the real person of the leader instead of being seen just as a code title, as a CEO. And one example I have here is the US CEO of Legitalis Group, Jonathan Grubbs. He would invite his 800 employees and their family members to join him periodically for a storytelling session where he would tell a story picked by one of the employees' children. So it is very, very sincere, genuine way to communicate, and also very authentic, and just really bring himself into the real life as a person. For the employees, they will see the CEO just like any other father, just like that. And other examples we have seen, some CEOs, they will show up at Zoom meetings with their pet by their side, like this picture showed here. And others, they will join those virtual happy hours or virtual talent shows that employees hosted, etc. So those are the ways that really bring the real person into life. And then consistency. Consistency is about walking the talk, keep the promise. And then vulnerability and humility. This is particularly relevant for the pandemic situation. As we know, this is an unprecedented situation. It is challenging for everyone, for employees, and also for leaders. So it's important for leaders to be cognizant of their limitations. It is fun that sometimes they just don't know what to do, and they don't know what decision to make. And it's also fun for them to show their emotions, like everyone else experiences, the emotions of sadness, emotions of fear. Even though in the business context, leaders are not required to do so, but in this particular situation, when everyone feel this way, and when the leaders show some vulnerability, they bring themselves closer to the employees. Because employees, they do look up to the leaders as role models, but they do not necessarily expect them to be superheroes. In fact, in front of this global enemy, really there's no one is a superhero. So it is okay to show emotions. So here are the two examples we talked about earlier, like Andrew Cuomo. In one of his video messaging, he genuinely expressed his sad emotions during the quarantine. He said, "It breaks my heart, it breaks my heart. There's a distance between me and my daughter because of this virus. It saddens me to the core, and it frightens me to the core. It's a hard time. It's a hard time on every level." And another example, Marriott CEO, again, he also recognized the challenge, the difficulty, the frustration. And there's nothing worse than telling highly valuable associates, people that are at the heart of this company, that their roles are being impacted by events completely outside of their control. So the third principle here, which is the empathetic communication. Being empathetic means the leaders, they are willing to take perspectives, to be willing to stand in the shoes of employees, to truly feel what they feel and truly understand what they are going through. And more importantly, be sensitive to employees' needs, employees' special needs. And we know in these challenging times, for some employees, it's really difficult. They have to homeschool 3 or 4 children. At the same time, juggle between their home and work duties. It is challenging. And it's important for leaders to sympathize with the hardships and challenges employees face. And more importantly, to express care and support, let them know that they are not alone. and they are being cared for by the leader, by the organization. And also not to forget to encourage employees and praise them for their good work, especially in these challenging times. At a higher level, this kind of reflects the people-first mindset of leadership, which is to put employees' welfare, employees' safety, well-being as the priority. And also make sure this is not just lip work. They need to show this mindset, people-first leadership with the actions. We have seen some CEOs committed to either taking pay cuts or not to take any salary, to trying to save jobs for more employees, and others they have committed not to lay off anyone during this year, and other companies that provide additional child care support for their employees. And then this also from another perspective shows the purposeful organization or purpose-driven organization, which is a purpose higher than just making profits, a purpose of meeting the needs of all stakeholders beyond just the shareholders, and a purpose to contribute to the better functioning of the society and also the welfare of the community, which start from the employee community. Here I have one study to share. This I conducted a while ago, recently published in Public Relations Review, which looked at leaders' communication in the change scenario, change situation, like merger and acquisition or downsizing. And this study looked at how the leaders' empathetic communication can influence employees' reaction to trust, reaction to the change. And the results showed that when the leaders, they communicate in an empathetic way, then employees tend to trust the organization more. They're also more open to the change initiative. They're also more likely to support change initiative. If we compare a company-wide change situation with this pandemic, we see some similarities, because in both situations, employees, they experience a lot of uncertainties, and they also experience negative emotions such as sadness, frustration, fear, or even anger. So it is predicted that empathetic communication also work for pandemic leadership communication. And later I will show you some first-hand data from the employee's perspective. Here are more examples. Like the Prime Minister of Thailand, he also emphasized the importance of empathy. During this outbreak, caring for one another and being kind are keys to overcoming this and other challenging diseases around the world. And another example, Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella, he said, there's no playbook for this, and having that deep empathy and understanding for each other's situation is needed now more than ever. And another good example, which Forbes labeled as a masterclass for the CEO's compassionate and empathetic communication. In fact, I think this letter really reflects all the principles we just talked about. You can easily Google this letter by Airbnb CEO Brian Chesky. When he announced the 25% layoff of the employees, he issued this this employee letter, and you can find online. And it is really good example. I can open it here. So basically, let me explain the structure. In this letter, he started off by frankly, very transparently and authentically sharing what is going on. And then he said, let me start with how we arrived at this decision. Then he started to share about the rationale, how the management come to this decision. He shared some the factual information regarding the impact of this pandemic have on the travel business, on Airbnb in particular, and how that influenced the future direction and the strategy of the company, and how they made the decision to be a more focused business that required them to reduce the workforce. And then he went on to talk about how the company is going to support employees who are leaving. Really show that compassion and empathy here. He said to take care of those who are leaving, we have looked across severance, equity, healthcare, and job support, and done our best to treat everyone in a compassionate and thoughtful way. And then he explained in detail for each of these categories what the company is doing. For example, for severance, The employees in the US will receive 14 weeks base pay plus 1 additional week for every year at Airbnb. For equity, they're dropping off the 1-year cliff for everyone they hire in the past year. And for healthcare, they are covering 12 months of healthcare for everyone who are leaving. And also they listed in the letter 5 ways how they are going to support the employees being laid off to find new jobs. Like this, they will provide alumni talent directory, placement team, offer 4 months of career service, etc. And they also allow the employees to leave with the laptop. Is that a computer is an important tool to find new work, so we are allowing everyone leaving to keep the Apple laptops. Even though this is something small, but every small gesture that shows your compassion, your empathy for employees matters. And think about this, this is way much better than the company just issue a cold letter to employees informing them that you do not need to come to work tomorrow, and then an HR person will follow up with you about the leaving package. And this letter from the CEO that really showed compassion and showed empathy for the employees. So moving on here, the next principle is expressing gratitude. Towards the end of Brancheski's letter, he also expressed gratitude for all the employees at Airbnb, also including those who are leaving. So to express gratitude basically is to say thank you, to recognize and acknowledge employees' contributions during this pandemic. And there are different ways to say thank you. There are tangible ways, there are intangible ways, but it doesn't matter how small the gesture is. It doesn't matter if it's tangible or intangible. More importantly, so you express it. Really, in this challenging situation, a little thanks can go a long way. I did a study before, recently published in International Journal of Business Communication, that looked at how a company's culture of gratitude can influence employees' identification with the company. And the results showed that when the leaders, when the company, they express gratitude, appreciation, and say thank you often to their employees, employees tend to associate themselves more. They tend to identify more with the company. And this can be easily explained by a theory called social identity theory that says people tend to associate themselves more with membership that is more rewarding. So when the leaders, they say thank you to you, and you will feel more rewarded and you feel appreciated. So you will feel more identified with the company. There's also other research showing that the expression of gratitude can contribute to employees' well-being and also employee engagement. And there are, as I said earlier, multiple ways of saying thank you. Like some CEOs, they will write handwritten thank you notes to employees during this pandemic. Like other companies here, one example is grocery store chain Kroger. They offered hero pay and a thank you bonus to the frontline workers during COVID-19. And this is important for those employees who are still working during the pandemic on the front line, and their work deserves to be recognized because they're really risking their health to contribute to the company. And another example is Starbucks CEO Kevin Johnson. In his letter to US employees, he also expressed genuine gratitude. He said, "Words cannot capture the immense pride and the gratitude I have for you, my Starbucks partners." And then later he said, "During this overwhelming and difficult time, you have shown up and stayed true to the mission and the values we stand for, and I'm forever grateful." So the next principle before we talk about the studies is to communicate optimism or positivity. Optimism basically is to emphasize the favorable aspects of situations, actions, and events, and believe in the best possible positive outcome of the events. Yes, it is natural for us to feel down, feel doom, feel sad during this pandemic. And it is challenging to stay positive. However, long-term wise, for companies and for employees' well-being, what really can make a difference is positivity, optimism, confidence, and hope. Like there's research showing that optimism is associated with the self-efficacy of employees, and it's also related to the leadership effectiveness and also employee performance. And for leaders, they are role models, and it's important for them to see the bright side of things and to communicate the silver lining of this whole pandemic and to encourage employees to see the positive side. And if we think about this pandemic, it is a crisis. Yes, we have to stay home, during the quarantine. We have to miss out a lot of quality outdoor times and also miss a lot of important moments like our kids' graduation ceremonies. But this is also an opportunity. And I don't know whether any of you recognize the two characters here on the screen. And this is actually how they say crisis in Chinese. These are the two Chinese characters. And the first character is wei, that means danger. And the second character is ji, means crisis. So this speaks loudly that every crisis comes with an opportunity. And for businesses, for companies, this is an opportunity too. This is an opportunity for them to reset the way they do things. I remember reading an article shared widely on LinkedIn written by an internal communication consultant, and that raised the question, how come business leaders only recognize the importance of internal communication? So many of them suddenly recognize internal communication is important only during this pandemic. They could have seen the importance of this way before this pandemic. Also, for communicators, we could have communicated more transparently, more authentically, and more empathetically, and we could have been treating each other better with care and support way before this pandemic. So this crisis really make leaders, communicators, and many of the companies realize that they could have done better and they're able to do better. So this is an opportunity for them to pause, to reflect the way they communicate to their stakeholders and the way they do things, and to do better in future. Here are two examples. One is from Levi's CEO, and he said, one of the things motivating me through this difficult time is the idea that we can learn and adapt and adjust, so we emerge stronger as a result of this test. Positivity. And the crisis will pass. We will get through this together and be a better and stronger company as a result of it. Another example is from our very own president at the University of Florida, which also demonstrated optimism. He said, as Gators, we have a tradition of pulling together and rising to meet major challenges with optimism and determination. I'm confident that our university community will meet this challenge. So now we have covered the 5 major principles here: transparency, authenticity, empathy, gratitude, and optimism. Now the question comes is, do these strategies really work or not from the employee's perspective, and why? So now I would like to share with you the 2 studies I recently completed. This is really fresh first-hand data. We just finished data collection a couple of weeks ago. And for the first study, this is a study I conducted with my colleague, Dr. Marsha Pistasso, and her doctoral student team. This is to test the 5 principles I just discussed using a survey, an employee survey. In this survey, we included over 1,000 employees from various organizations across 15 industries in the US. And in the survey, we asked them to rate their CEOs in terms of these 5 principles and how they communicate during this pandemic. And we also measure them in terms of their attitudes, such as their trust towards the company, their identification with the company, their psychological well-being, and the feeling of uncertainty. Here are our major findings. So in this figure, you can see that on the left-hand side, and that is the CEO's use of the 5 principles or 5 strategies we just discussed. On the right-hand side, and that is the employee's identification with the company and employee trust, which are both very important employee attitudes towards the organization during this pandemic. And the numbers you see here, the larger numbers, that means stronger impact. And then the smaller numbers mean the weaker impact. And the sun means positive or negative impact. And the result basically supported our hypothesis that the CEO's use of these 5 principles, they all work for boosting employees' identification with the company and enhancing their trust towards the company. Basically, that says that if the CEOs communicate in a transparent, authentic, empathetic manner, they express gratitude and optimism, employees, they tend to feel a stronger sense of belonging with the company, and they tend to associate themselves more with the company during this pandemic. They also trust the company more. And if we look at the middle of this figure, those are the employees' psychological feelings, which we propose are the factors that explain why the CEO's use of these strategies can influence employees' positive outcomes. So employees feeling uncertainty, the results show that the CEO's use of these 5 principles can help reduce employees' feeling of uncertainty. They will feel more in control during the pandemic. And then when they feel less uncertainty, that contributes to their psychological well-being. Basically, it means a healthy mental state, feeling happy in general. And when they feel less uncertainty, and then they tend to trust the company more. And also the result you can see here, when they feel their psychological well-being better, in a better state of psychological well-being, then they tend to identify with the company more and trust the company more. Then one question you might ask is, which strategy is most effective, right? And we did some follow-up analysis to compare the different strategies, and the results showed that basically these 3, authenticity, empathy, and gratitude, they consistently show the relatively stronger impact than transparency and optimism on these employee outcomes. However, it doesn't say the other 2 are not important. They all worked. It's just that the authenticity, empathy, and gratitude show stronger impact on the employee, the identification and employee trust in particular. But for employees' uncertainty, transparency showed as equal strong impact as authenticity, empathy, and gratitude. And that can be explained because when the CEOs, they communicate in a transparent manner, they provide employees the information they need. So employees understand the situation better, so they will feel less uncertain about their work and about the situation they're in. And for psychological well-being, optimism, the results showed optimism showed as strong impact as authenticity, empathy, and gratitude. And they show stronger impact than transparency. And this is also aligned with the previous research that showed strong connection between optimism and employees' psychological well-being, how they feel psychologically. So after the first study, I was also interested in supervisory communication. When we talk about leaders, we know that leaders does not just involve the top leadership, CEOs. It also involves leadership at other levels, like middle level managers, the line managers. And the supervisors are the ones who interact with the employees on a day-to-day basis. And supposedly their communication will affect employee, how they feel, and how during this pandemic. So for this study, I was interested in looking at how supervisory communication can affect employee trust during COVID-19. And the study focused particularly on trust. One is because it's an important issue for organizations. Another reason is because the study is sponsored by the Trust Consortium of our university. And in this study, I used a different theoretical framework called motivating language theory developed by Mayfield and Mayfield. And in this theory, it says, supervisors use of 3 types of languages: meaning making, direction giving, and empathetic messages, and they will lead to positive employee outcomes. Meaning making language means the supervisors, they talk about the values, beliefs, culture, purpose of the organization, and try to tie employees' personal goals to a higher purpose of the company. Direction giving basically is to give clear guidance. Tell me what I'm supposed to do during the pandemic, and provide clear expectations about the job, and give clear reward contingencies, etc. And empathetic communication, that is aligned with what we discussed earlier about empathetic communication. In this study, I surveyed about nearly 400 employees from different organizations across 50 industries in the US. And here are the findings. So in this model, you can see on the left-hand side, that is supervisors' use of these 3 types of messages: direction giving, empathetic, and meaning-making language. And on the right-hand side, you see employee trust, including trust towards the leader and trust towards the organization. And the hypothesis is the supervisors' use of these 3 types of languages can help meet employees' psychological need for competence and relatedness during this pandemic, which in turn can boost employee trust. And this hypothesis was basically supported by the data. And in other words, the supervisors' use of direction giving, empathetic, meaning-making language, they all significantly affected employee trust. But if we compare the effect size, the differences in terms of their impact, you can see, like for direction giving, the effect size is 0.19. For empathetic language, that's 0.50, and meaning making 0.14. What this means is empathetic language is the strongest, has the strongest impact. And again, it doesn't mean the other two are not important, it's just to a lesser extent. And also the results show that the supervisor's use of these 3 types of messages, they can help meet employees' psychological needs for competence and fitness. Direction giving, for example, when the supervisors, they provide clear guidance to employees and telling them what they need to do during the pandemic, employees will feel more competent because they know what to do, and they will feel more in control of the situation. So that will enhance their self-efficacy. And also when they are given a clear direction, so they feel they are in this group together, they are all working toward the same goals, so they will feel a sense of relatedness. And for empathetic language, again, so when the employees feel cared for, feel supported by their supervisors, they feel more competent at their work because they're not alone there, they are being supported by the managers. And also they feel more related to the supervisor and to the company on the whole as well. And for meaning-making language, this showed more of an impact on relatedness than competence. And this can be explained because, you know, meaning-making language is to talk about, the leaders talk about the values, culture, beliefs, purpose. And those are the things that really can help bond people together. So that enhances their feeling of relatedness. So I'm in this together with other people in this company. So overall, as mentioned earlier, this study supported that supervisors' use of direction giving, empathetic, and meaning-making language can enhance employees' psychological need for competence, relatedness, and then enhance their trust towards the leader and the organization. Now, here comes the big question, the so what question, right? This is important for every academic study, I think. What do the findings mean for practitioners and for leaders? First of all, be empathetic. As the 2 studies consistently show that empathetic communication is really having great impact on employees' their positive outcomes. So it is important for leaders to take perspectives, to be understanding, show care, love, and support for employees, and sympathize with what they are going through. And this showed a higher level of leadership with leading with humanity, to make sure that people first is not just lip work, to demonstrate that with actions, and to put employees' safety and their well-being as the priority, and also embrace transparency. It is important for organizations to develop, to have an open and transparent climate, and this starts from the leader. Leaders have to provide timely, frequent information to employees and provide clear and accurate information to employees, and to listen to them and involve them in the decision-making process. And convey authenticity, stay true to their values, be genuine, and bring themselves as a real person into the real life. And then also, it is okay to be vulnerable. To continue the list here, to say thank you, express gratitude through both words and actions. It doesn't matter how small the gesture is. What matters is it is genuine. It is from the bottom of the heart. And it matters more when it is from the leader. Also, demonstrate optimism. It is important for leaders to lead by examples, to communicate confidence, to motivate employees, to promote hope and positive energy, positivity, because these are contagious that can really motivate employees. And align communication with purpose. This is about using the meaning-making language we talked about earlier to talk about the values, talk about the purpose, especially in a situation when people feel disoriented, when they feel lost. Always go back to the purpose of the company. Purpose can always serve as the compass for the organization, and try to connect employees' personal goals with their job goals with the higher purpose of the company, so that they feel they're making an impact. They're contribute to something bigger. And last but not least, recognize and tap into employees' psychological needs. Recognize that the employees, they have this need for being recognized, need for competence, need for relatedness. So to provide clear guidance, directions to them, and also to care and support them. And remember, at the end of the day, what the leaders or communicators are communicating with are not just employees, they are human beings with emotions. They are people. It's people that make the business. It's people who innovate, and it's people who make a difference for the organization. So this basically wraps up my presentation here. I would like to open the floor for questions, the comments, and I hope you can share some of your wisdom and your perspectives, your observation regarding the best practices of leadership communication during this pandemic. This is an ongoing study, and my team and I, we are still working on a few other projects related to this topic. And the one thing we are looking at is to bring culture into the formula here, to look at how organizational culture may play a role in the leadership pandemic communication. We also want to look at whether these principles can hold true in a different culture, like for example, China, the Eastern societal culture, which has a different power structure. So we are very interested in continuing the study. Thank you very much, and welcome your feedback and your input.
Thank you, Rita. Thank you for sharing your latest research with us. I think it's very interesting. And Isabella had a first question. Isabella, can you unmute yourself? Put your camera on, maybe. That's nice.
The camera should be on.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you for this wonderful webinar, which I find extremely interesting. I was wondering how far empathy can go with regards to safeguarding the existence of a company. I mean, you just showed the example of the Airbnb CEO that obviously had to lay off a lot of staff. But, you know, where are the limits to empathy? There's, you know, there is a discussion going on in Germany. I'm based in Germany about empathy in management, and how much empathy is necessary, and how much empathy you can allow yourself to show towards employees. So I would find that really interesting. And also with regards to the transparency, goes in the same direction. How much transparency is possible when safeguarding the financial situation of a company, and perhaps knowing that it is very challenging, but at the same time trying not to enhance instability among the employees, and insecurity and fear.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Isabella. This is a fantastic question, a very thoughtful question as well. To address your first question, you know, empathy or people first, right? And my thought is there are sometimes some shortcuts for managers. You know, it is easy to just lay off people, but when they have alternatives, that should be their last resort. So they should first think about some other effective ways that can solve the issue, but at the same time preserve the people's job. So that is to have this mindset in mind and to really evaluate the situation. I think that the issue is some managers, they just take the shortcut and just let people go, and that's easy to do it. However, you know, there are always other ways there. So that is, you know, for being empathetic. And for the transparency, And that is a really good question when we talk about the transparent for whom, right? And there are information the managers, they want to share, and there's information employees want to know. And when we talk about this concept, we refer to the stakeholder-based transparency. I think the bottom line is to first understand the employees, understand what the information matters for them, and then evaluate your situation. Of course, there situations that you have to wait to communicate a certain information. Either you need more information to communicate, or you needed to be able to see a clearer picture to communicate the information to employees. But I think the idea is you need to be upfront with where you are. If you do not know, you do not have an answer for the employees right now, tell them that you are working on it and you can share more information later. And also it is important just to really listen to employees. And sometimes, the leaders, they just share what they think is important. And the employees, if they do not get the information they need, they still will seek out other ways to get the information they want, and they will talk to their colleagues, and sometimes those information sources could be inaccurate. So I think importantly is the manager, they try to stand from the employee's perspective. And there are a lot of ways to listen. They can talk to people, they can easily send a quick poll, or in small group setting, they can listen to people's concerns to get an idea what the information they need will be most helpful for them.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for the great question.
We have a question for Lorna, but I don't think, it seems that her mic doesn't work. She's texting me. Jos, then you're next. Jos Bartels?
I'll unmute myself. Thanks,
Good,
thanks, Rita, for your very nice presentation. I was wondering especially about the two studies. Mm-hmm. So if I look at the two models, mm-hmm. and I try to compare them, then so I have two questions, but one is just, are you trying to communicate them in two different papers, or because I don't see the consistency between the two studies yet, or the overlap, or one following up the other. Could you please elaborate a bit on that?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Joss. And by the way, it's so good to see you here. I know we are connected on LinkedIn.
Hi.
Nice to meet you. Yes, for these two studies, the first one really is a study, to test these 5 principles, whether it works or not. The second study is just a side project I personally am interested in to see how the supervisor's communication would influence the employee outcomes. And I tried not to repeat the theoretical framework. One thing I can easily do is just also look at those 5 principles and how that works for the supervisors, from the supervisor's perspective. And I probably would do another study to look at, for direct managers, whether those 5 principles still hold true and still work well for them. But this study, I used the theoretical framework, motivating language theory, which developed by 2 very famous leadership communication scholars. This is because this is an established theory and particularly developed for supervisors communication. And also I think this is important, because direction giving, this is something I didn't cover in the 5 principles. Transparency more or less touched a little bit upon that, but this actually is inspired by a comment from someone I received on the article I wrote for IPR. I posted on LinkedIn, and someone said, there's another principle beyond the 5 I talked about, is being directive and being assertive. Because in those uncertain situations, people don't know what to do, and they want the leader just tell me what I'm supposed to do. So give me clear directions. So that's why I want to test from that direction giving aspect whether it works. And it happens in this theory, it involves this aspect. That's why I use the motivating language theory for the second study.
Well, I like both studies, but I think it's 2 different papers, right?
Yeah, they are too.
Yeah. And for the organizational culture, do you already have an approach for that? So for example, the Quinn and Cameron approach on these 4 dimensions of culture, or is that?
That's a good suggestion. I could definitely look at. I'm
not sure if the competing values model is the one you should need, but it could lead to conclusions about that in a specific So in a culture with specific kind of characteristics, these
Yeah,
relationships are different than in another culture with specific characteristics.
absolutely. Right, right. Thank you for the suggestion. I definitely will look into the two models here. You can just
Good luck.
talk about. Yeah, my original thought, I haven't have a study, developed yet. It's just an idea. It's just to see how whether these 5 principles will still work, or maybe some are strategies are more effective than others. Like in some societies, they have a relatively lower expectation of transparency from the leaders in some
Yep.
cultures. So I'm just interested in how this play out in a different cultural context. But thank you so much for suggesting these two models. I'll definitely look into them.
Good luck.
Probably, yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Jos. The next question is from Shermini, yeah?
Hey, yes. Hi, Rita. Thank you for your insightful information. My question is about this. I live in Curacao, and now due to the corona crisis, our economic position, which was already very bad, has gotten worse. So many people lost their jobs, and we're going through a difficult time around here. And people are asking all the time for the political, because I work in a political sector. People are asking for the prime minister, for other politicians and ministers to come up front and talk about it. And I noticed different areas that you talked about, showing gratitude and be empathetic, be transparent, but still it doesn't really work. So I see that the government is trying to do something, but still I see that people are so frustrated, they don't have money, they have a financial problems, so it even got to chaos on the island, people demonstrating. So it is as if those things are not working here.
That's a good question. Well, thank you for the question. Well, I would say, yes, the study, this is based on data collected from companies, but I do have an example shared earlier, which is from the Andrew Cuomo, the New York governor. I do agree with you that people in general, they are critical about the governments, and they will be angry wherever they see anyway. However, think about this. By comparison, like New York governor, I'm just using the examples I'm familiar with here in the US, New York governor and the Florida governor, they really got totally different feedback from the citizens regarding how the way they handle the crisis. And some of the best practices of the New York governor they are doing is just being very transparent. One example is they host this daily televised briefings and about what is going on, and to just keep public informed. And yes, the public are always angry because they need to blame someone for this whole thing going on in all the whole pandemic. However, it is better. I think it is better for you to communicate than not to communicate. If you do not communicate, they will criticize you more. If you communicate, yes, they will still criticize you. But if you are consistent, you think from their perspective, you talk about the new policies or the new measures being undertaken, how that can help the public. I think this is not a one-time thing. It's not that I come out and speak about this and then it's done. Yes, of course, that will not satisfy the public. I think the best practice of the New York governor, is Andrew Cuomo. He's very consistent. He's doing this from the very beginning, every day, nonstop until today. Of course, I'm not suggesting this is what every politician should do, but at least this is working. Really, people are very happy with how he's communicating about the situation, and he's very genuine. He's not, in his communication, if you look at some of the videos, he's very authentic, and he always talk about things from the citizens' perspective, from the people's perspective, and they also relate what they are feeling with what the things himself is experiencing. So I think effective communication need to be on a continuous basis. We cannot just rely on come out one time and do it and then you're done. So I think we need to work hard and towards this goal and really build the messaging for, as communicators, then for those politicians, we can work with them, partner with them to help them. So because they are politicians, or governors, most of them, they do not understand the mindset of PR, not so much. And it is important that the PR team, the communication people, can help them develop messaging which is aligned with their character, and also consult them and encourage them to do these things we just talked about. And these are I think in the study, this is the data basically mostly is from companies, but then one sector is government services. So that is one industry among the 15. There's only less than 10% of the people, but it's covered. But the majority of them are from the business context. I think it will be interesting, for me. I'm not sure I can fully answer this question. I can, for future, I can conduct more study, particularly looking at this sector. But just based on my gut feeling and also, all the research I have read, I think it should work for politicians. It just is important that this need to be done consistently.
Thanks, Sharminia, all the way from Curaçao. Ger, are you still there?
Yes, I'm still there.
Good.
Good evening, everyone. First of all, thanks a lot for the really very interesting presentation. And we're interested in the study to see, if you look specifically in the study also into differences between let's say the larger companies, of which a lot of examples were over there, and the smaller and middle sized companies. Is there a difference in approach between those companies you have seen or not?
Excellent question. Yes, we did run some analysis. We collected information about the company's industry, their company size, etc. We didn't see a significant effect of the company size. It didn't really matter saying, larger companies, these strategies work better, or smaller companies, this strategy work better. It looks like they didn't really affect how this model works. And then I think because this is a generalized approach, test the model, and it will be interesting to use a case approach, to look at one particular small or large company context in future for my future studies, because that can reveal some of the nuances. I have a book published earlier this year on startup companies, public relations, and strategic communication. And I interview for that study, I looked at particular small-sized companies. They do have different, structure and different, and also different dynamics of leadership and leadership communication, because their CEOs will interact with the employees. In the startup context, will be more on a day-to-day basis, just like the supervisors. So I would say more maybe for smaller companies, the supervisory communication, those theories could apply for the smaller companies' CEO communication, because they have the chance to interact with the employees on a daily basis. But for a multinational company, the employees, they really get to see their CEO, and then so that's just my few cents about that.
Okay, we have two more questions. I hope you have time, still time for us. Katerina, you're next.
Hi, thank you, Rita, for this wonderful presentation. I just want to know if frequency of communication would matter for the CEO or the leaders to communicate. Is that part of your study, or do you see how frequent should the leaders communicate besides the 5 strategies that they use? Thank you.
Great question, Catherine. We did include that in our definition of transparency, and one aspect is full disclosure, the first aspect we talked about, and that involves the timely communicate, frequent communicate. So we have one question asked employees to read their CEO's communication, how frequent it is. It is aligned with the overall transparent communication. So I would say it's definitely not too frequent. We don't want to receive the CEO's message like every few hours or every day even. And because it is really emotion-laden and information-laden situation for employees, that we do not want to burden them too much. But still, I think the bottom line is to meet employees' information need. If you communicate once a week and the information, the message includes information that employees need, I think that's sufficient. But I think it's really hard to say, you know, how often. It depends on the company's situation, but frequent is important. But and for all these principles, you know, we do not just overdo it. So it is important, yeah, to communicate in a timely and frequent manner, but not just too frequent, like overburden them.
Okay, the last question is from Barbara. She's asking the question for Lorna. Barbara, you can unmute yourself.
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, hi Barbara.
Yes, hey there. I'm actually asking my question on behalf of my colleague Lorna, whose microphone doesn't work. So I have the following question. With regarding to the recognition piece, do you have any recommendation regarding a tool or process to implement the online voting nomination to encourage people to take part?
So any recommendations, if I understand the question correctly, is any recommendations for encouraging people to participate?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, and then that's a very good question. You know, when we talk about listening, and there are different ways for leaders and for managers to gather feedback from employees. And then if it's not sensitive topics, I would say there are a lot of venues and managers can use. They can encourage employees to email them, and also they can talk to them directly. But for some sensitive topics, if you're gathering feedback, for example, about the financial situation, or you know, whether you know, some of the really essential, important, kind of sensitive topic for the employees, and they do not want to disclose their names, then there are anonymous surveys that can be easily done. And also there are some old-fashioned ways, like suggestion boxes. You can always, you know, make it anonymous. And companies, they also use internal social media, and that is also an open venue to share concerns, feedback. And also the good thing about using enterprise social media like Slack and other Chatter, Yammer, etc., is that you can see what the other people are sharing about their sentiment, and you will feel safer to speak out, and you will be more encouraged to speak out. So there are different ways to do it, and I think that the bottom line is the managers are open and provide a safe environment to make people feel that they can speak up, to share their thoughts, their concerns, or their ideas. And the one thing about speaking up is it's not just to share concerns, and many companies, they recognize this is an opportunity for people to innovate. And there are you know, a lot of innovative ideas generated from the employees, you know, how we can save jobs, you know, how we can make a safer environment. So this listening is not just to listen to concerns, is also to collect ideas, feedback, suggestions that they can make more informed decisions. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was the last one. Thank you so much, Rita, for sharing your presentation with us.
Sure, my pleasure.
Yeah, it was very interesting. This is the end to everyone. Thank you for joining us. Stay safe and healthy, and we hope to see you next time.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining me. And then I hope we can stay connected. This is my contact information. And if you would like to continue the conversation, I would love to connect with you on LinkedIn or Twitter, etc. I hope everyone is safe and healthy. Thank you so much.